Hi, this is Brian Kim. I'm going to share with you this case of a patient who's referred for a dislocated silicone plate haptic IOL. You're going to see me cutting this lens out. And this silicone plate haptic lens is a little bit of a booger as far as trying to cut it out. It's very slippery and the plate part is very, very thin. And so you're going to see me struggling to cut through this lens into multiple pieces, taking it out, and then performing my Yamane technique using the AR40 lens. So you can see this lens looks like it's well centered, but the fact of the matter is it's not, because when he sits upright, the lens dislocates about 40 to 50%. You can barely see it. Drying the surface of the eye, as you can see, obviously I didn't do a good job drying, because as I made my mark, it's very smudged on the right side. Using the cannula to find 180 degrees apart, I marked the left side. This is a fixed caliper from Epsilon, indenting 2.5 millimeters posterior to the limbus and then 2 millimeters adjacent. And then marking those indentations on the right side and then now on the left side. Again, trying to do my best to dry the surface. Again, indenting with the fixed caliper, 2.5 millimeters posterior to the limbus, and then 2 millimeters adjacent. Quite a bit of ink on the cannula, so it's bleeding a little bit. Using the back of the trocar needle, I indent 3.5 millimeters posterior to the limbus, tunnel about 3 millimeters with the trocar needle towards the indentation, making sure I'm through the sclera, and then I dive down. Making my incisions to remove the lens. This is the incision for the AC maintainer. This is the incision to externalize the leading haptic. You can see every time I make the incision, the whole lens wobbles like crazy. And it's sitting very posterior. You can't see it in the video, but it's sitting very, very far back. Obviously not very stable here. This is some intracameral epinephrine, and as I inject it, you can see the lens starts moving wildly. Not very stable. And then this is some dispersive viscoelastic. Very carefully inflating, not too much, because as I do this, the lens is really pushed back. And this is a 3 millimeter blade. Make a vertical groove. Tunnel through the cornea. And then I enter here. All right, using 2 forceps, I'm going to grab the lens, a little bit of a challenge. Again, very slippery silicone material. And it's kind of difficult to see because it's very clear. Got a good grip. Popped both haptics into the anterior chamber. Got a good grip with my left hand with the IOL cutter. I'm trying to cut it in half, but it's, rather thick. I'm not able to bisect it completely in half, so I'm trying to grab it again here on the big piece. And then cutting it again. So instead of a normal Pac-Man, I have like a kind of mutant Pac-Man. It's kind of a three-fold Pac-Man cut. So it's 3 pieces. Going to grab the right side piece. I switched hands and I have the IOL holder in my right hand. Pulled that first piece out, it broke off. And then trying to grab the second piece. It slipped off, and then grabbing it again. That's the thickest part of the lens. It's a little bit hard to grab. But I need to really grab it from that thick part. So I grab it. And fortunately, whoop, slipped off again. Grab it a third time. And I'm finally able to get it out. And then because I Pac-Manned it, I'm able to rotate it and then pull the last piece out. Placing the 22 gauge thin-walled AC maintainer, pushing some dispersive viscoelastic through the main incision, and then performing some anterior vitrectomy through a pars plana incision. Sweeping the left paracentesis incision, you can see it's peaked there, a little bit of vitreous to the wound. As I'm sweeping, I'm able to remove that vitreous, and there's no vitreous to the wound now. Injecting some intracameral triamcinolone while simultaneously performing vitrectomy. This is the 25 gauge needle, bending it so that the bevel faces to the right. This is the right side needle, the 30 gauge thin-walled needle. I'm bending it 9 millimeters from the tip, making sure the bevel faces towards the main incision. The left side needle bent at the hub, making sure the bevel faces away. This is the emerald cartridge, injecting cohesive viscoelastic through the barrel and on the platform, and then placing the Sensor AR40 lens on the platform, pushing the optic down so it's seated, bringing the wings together, making sure the lens bends backward, the trailing haptic comes out through the back, and the leading haptic goes straight through the barrel. Placing it through the injector, making sure that the trailing haptic is up away from the plunger, and then advance the plunger and the lens. So now I'm ready to go. Placing the 25 gauge needle through the contralateral limbal incision, placing the injector through the main incision, making sure both bevels face each other. My assistant advances the lens, the leading haptic comes out. I dock the haptic on the bevel of the needle. She continues to advance the lens. More and more of the haptic goes into the needle. I withdraw the needle and then the haptic comes out passively without touching or damaging the haptic. Delivering the optic and then ensuring that the trailing haptic is swept to the right or facing to the right. Pushing dispersive viscoelastic to coat the cornea and push the optic back. Turning on infusion and then externalizing the leading haptic more, pushing the optic away from me, which makes cannulating the trailing haptic through the right side needle much easier. I have more access. You can see the AC maintainers in the way. I remeasure with the caliper, and that is good. I'm going to remove the AC maintainer and reposition it. It was taped down, so I'm going to go ahead and push it back, but then I'm having my assistant push it away as I place the needle through the sclera here. So again, remeasuring 2.5 millimeters back, turning on infusion, holding the trocar cannula, stabbing the conjunctiva and sclera at the first mark, tunneling 2 millimeters, feeling the resistance, going 2 millimeters, and then diving down. Remeasuring with the calipers really advantageous, especially if you feel like the conjunctiva is moved, or in this case, because of the mark, the ink kind of bled. I wanted to make sure I remeasured it. Repositioning the AC maintainer now, and then I'm going after the trailing haptic. Sweeping it to the left, docking the haptic on the bevel of the needle. You see the view and the access is so easy, clear, 2 pushes, and then I'm in. Disengaging the needle from the syringe and letting the haptic fall back into the vitreous space. internalizing the leading haptic with microforceps, remeasuring with the fixed caliper, holding the eye with contralateral fixation, turning on infusion, again because the conjunctiva is loose, so it's very important to remeasure. Stabbing the conjunctiva and sclera at the first mark, making sure I can feel the resistance, tunneling through the sclera 2 millimeters and then diving down. Again, smooth microforceps to grasp the leading haptic, turning the needle towards and facing the haptic, 2 pushes and I'm in. Pulling the left side needle out, making sure I limit how much haptic comes out. Again, I never had a situation where the haptic slipped out, and that's because that 30 gauge thin walled needle grips the AR40 haptic so well. Again, turning the AC maintainer away again, pulling the right side needle out, making sure not too much of the haptic comes out, cauterizing the tip. You can see nice flat positioning of the haptic, flat on the sclera, which ensures that the lens is going to be most reflective of in-the-bag IOL placement. Doing this technique, I have very consistent and very good refractive results doing the technique this way. Placing a 10-0 nylon suture to close the main incision. Performing some more vitrectomy through the pars plana trocar cannula. Performing the surgical PI with the vitrector. Nice small PI. Using the vitrector to perform IA. So this is in cortex mode, removing all the viscoelastic from the anterior chamber. And then coming from the other side, doing the same thing. Hydrate my incisions. I'll take the trocar cannula out, take the AC maintainer out, and that'll be the end of the case. So again, this is a patient with a dislocated plate haptic silicone lens. This case really illustrates how challenging it is to take that plate haptic lens out. In my case, I had to cut it into 3 pieces. It's very slippery. The optic is really thick in the middle, and the plate part, the peripheral part, is real flimsy and thin, so it's easy to just rip the lens. So you saw that I didn't do a Pac-Man, I did like a double, because I cut it in 3 pieces and then slowly tried to rotate the lens pieces out one by one. And then I externalized the leading haptic through a 25 gauge needle passive docking technique so that I don't have to touch the tip of the haptic, which can damage the haptic. And by doing it that way, I'm able to push the lens away from me. I was able to very easily cannulate the trailing haptic through the right side needle and then do the same thing on the left side needle. Again, staying nice and flat to the sclera and getting excellent support for the haptic to get the best refractive result. So I hope this was helpful to you, and I thank you for your attention.